So many are sitting at the intersection and they're scared to move because they don't want to mess up. Whether you go left or right, or you take A or B, there's good and bad. There's not wrong or right. There's better or not as good, but there are certainly not failures. Maybe you've even heard this, like fail forward faster. Cool. I mean, I like the premise for sure. I get it. But I would like us to take that one step further and eliminate the word fail.
What if you could build a business in the modern world as big or as small as you want without having to compromise the things that were the most important to you in the very beginning? This is the Wealthy Consultant Talks Podcast with Taylor Welch and Mike Walker, as they share with you today their learning lessons from stories in their experiences over the past 10 to 15 years and share with you right here, right now. Let's get into it.
What is going on, my friends? Mike Walker here. Welcome to another episode of the Wealthy Consultant Podcast. Thanks for joining me today. Hey, I want to dig in with you, and I'm going to start with a question. Have you ever thought to yourself, man, if only I knew then what I know now, how much further would I be? Have you ever experienced that? I know I have. I look back at some of the decisions I made in my first businesses years and years ago, and I look back now just going like, oh my God, like if only I knew now what I know now, right? Like, God, I would have done so many different things, right? Well, hey, look, number one, that's just called being human. That's just called growing up as an entrepreneur for sure. But one of the biggest mistakes I see business owners make is not so much in their decision making, it's the speed at which they come to those decisions. They often will sit and mull over things for long periods of time or think very kind of in binary terms. Okay, should I go left or right? Should I do A or B? And the reality is that either is better than being in the middle. So many are sitting at the intersection and they're scared to move because they don't want to mess up, when in reality, there's going to be hardships, roadblocks and all the hurdles either way, whether you go left or right, or you take A or B, there's good and bad. There's not wrong or right. There's better or not as good, but there are certainly not failures. Maybe you've even heard this, like fail forward faster. Cool. I mean, I like the premise for sure. I get it. But I would like us to take that one step further and just eliminate the word fail. It's not failure. It's testing. It's not failure. It's testing. Oh, wow, that didn't go the way I'd want. All right, next. Boom, move on to the next one, right? Now, I'm not suggesting that you just launch yourself off the cliff and just radically think that, I'm just going to start breaking shit and figure it out as I go. But there is a little bit of taste in that. I will be honest, some of the most wealthiest, influential, impactful, most successful, both monetarily and in life in general, are people that have been a little bit more just, I'll figure it out as I go. I will admit, I am a processor. I am the type of person that will sit there and go, okay, I'm going to get it right the very first time, right? There are some pros and cons to that, to be sure. But what I want to present to you today, my friends, is the idea that, hey, you know what? As you become better as an entrepreneur, as you gain more and more experience, trust that gut and trust that you will figure it out as you go. Because the reality is that, it's kind of driving down that street in a dense fog. Those lights of yours, those high beams are only going to shine so far. You're only ever going to see so much through that fog. But as a driver, someone that's driven in the fog before, you realize that, once I get another, 100 yards or 200 yards down the road, I'm going to see the next 100 or 200 yards, right? You trust that sequence of knowledge that's coming out at you. So you don't have to see all the way down a mile ahead. You know that for every couple hundred yards, you're going to see just what you need to see in the immediate to get you to the next step. But what I want to introduce you to today is actually something I'm extracting from a book I've written called The Systems Thinking Visionary. It drops this year. I'm really excited about it. It's just now in its earliest stages of editing and then, the cover design, all the cool stuff. But I'm really excited about it. You'll hear more about it. Don't worry. I'll get you the links and all the things later. But one of the ideas that I pulled in from this book, and I want to share with you today, is called quantum decision making. And this is extracted from quantum computing. This is something that's very much the cutting edge of all things kind of computer generation, because what it's basically doing is, if you know anything about, computers and how they essentially work in bits, right? You have kind of like A or B, that's very binary, zeros and ones. And essentially what happens, and I won't go deep on this, but it just thinks in like yes or no's, black or white, 0 or 1. It's binary, right? And so you have these bits that essentially switch on, off, on, off, on, off. And in order for it to test something, It basically goes through every sequence of possibilities until it finally finds the answer. So if you can imagine a maze and we're just trying to get from one side to the other side, well, it's going to try every single route until it finally learns its way to get to the other side. So now if that's a simple maze, then obviously it's going to do it in a matter of like nanoseconds. But if it's a very complex maze, it could take days for that computer to understand and learn all the different variables that are at play there to get to the other side. That's traditional computing. Quantum computing is a whole nother animal. It literally will look at that same maze and look at all of the different ways at once. It's trippy stuff. You should look into it. Google quantum computing and dive down that rabbit hole if you want to. Obviously, we're not going to take the time to do that here. But the premise is that it figured out how to get from point A to point Z in just radically faster. I mean, I'm talking to the equivalent of if a traditional computer, say, would take, okay, it's going to take, literally 1 trillion years to go from one to the other. A quantum computer could do it in a matter of minutes. That's the scale at which I'm talking about, the progression that we are seeing over the coming years in computing. It is radical stuff. It's going to change everybody's life in a whole lot of ways. It's really, really exciting stuff. We don't have quantum computers necessarily yet, certainly not at the public level for all of us to access. But we do have the ability to access this computer between our ears. All right. And this computer is able to use quantum physics. This isn't just some pseudoscience woo-woo stuff. I'm talking about legit science. I want you to start processing decision-making through multiple variables at once or multiple outcomes at once. And this will really speed up your ability. Instead of you thinking like left or right, A or B, black or white, binary, I want you to start thinking in multiple different outcomes at the same time. It will allow you to process the potential outcomes faster, number one. But two, you will notice a quantum connection between your decision-making processes, and you'll actually be able to identify trends or even a ripple effect that will happen from different decisions. Because here's the thing, typically it's not the initial decision that makes the biggest impact. It's actually the second, third, or fourth order of consequence. And a lot of times people haven't looked that far to realize, oh, wow, now that I know what I know now, maybe I shouldn't have made this decision because it's caused all these downstream effects, right? And that's where getting better as an entrepreneur, like, what used to take you 6 months to do in terms of maybe launching a new offer or taking something from, zero to $100,000 or whatever it is, whatever the journey is, it might take you, say, 6 months when you're first starting out. But what happens after you've been in the game for like 5-10 years, right? You could probably do it in a matter of a week or maybe even an afternoon. Why? Well, it's because you've already gone through that same sequence of decision-making so many times. You have already traversed all the different options so many times that now you are operating like a quantum computer. You're like, oh, I see all the variables at once now, and I'm able to route myself through to the end goal much, much faster because I am looking at it through quantum mechanics. I'm looking at all the variables at once, not just a binary, oh, let's try this. Oh, no, that didn't work. Let me try a different way. Oh, no, that didn't work. See what I'm saying? So it is experience. You can learn this through experience, but you can also forward focus this and treat it like in your today decision making through the fog. You can actually use this now today, even though you don't necessarily have experience. Okay, well, now that I'm at the $100,000 a month mark, we got to get to the million. There's a 10x jump there. I've never done that before. What am I going to do? Well, you could spend the next 5 years like routing yourself through one variable at a time, right? And just trial and error it, which is just painful and expensive. You could assign yourself or link arms with a mentor who's already been there and done that. That's one of the best ways because now you are essentially plugging in their brain into your experience and therefore sidestepping all the different, trials and tribulations that they incurred, right, to get to the end result. So now that speeds you up. And or you can use this quantum decision-making process. So let me give you just 4 quick things to think through and how to process this. Actually, there's 5, but the 4 main ones are this. Number 1, write down your current big decision. So what is it? Well, I've got to figure out how we're going to launch this new thing, or we've got to move offices to another country, whatever. You decide, right? It could be anything under the sun. So number 1, write down your current big decision. Number 2, force yourself to imagine 4 radically different outcomes. Not like, oh, it might do this or it might do. No, I'm talking like radically different, way outside the box. Because remember, this is quantum. You don't have to go that route. but we need to just explore a very holistic, very broad macro view of all the different ways that this thing could go down. All right. So number 2, force yourself to imagine 4 radically different ways forward. Number 3, for each of those options, ask, if we did this, what else would change in our business? If we did this, what else would change? So now we're starting to look at the second and third order consequences. This is where the kind of that quantum analogy I'm talking about, instead of thinking like, oh, it's just 1 to 0 or 0 to 1, it's now going, okay, we're going to look at 1, 2, and 3 all at the same time per each of these radical different decisions. So now you can kind of see this, the tree effect or the root effect that's starting to happen, right? Number 4, look for patterns and connections between the scenarios. This is the powerful part. When you have 4 radically different outcomes, and then with each of those 4 different radical outcomes, you have 2 to 3 downstream effects of each of those outcomes. Now you can start to look for any commonalities between those downstream events. And you might realize, wow, even despite having 3 radical different outcomes, the downstream effect of all 3 of those are A, B, and C, or just this one, or just this thing, right? Or this person, or this result, whatever it might be. Now what happens, you start to realize, wow, of all the different outcomes, we keep coming up with this one thing. This one thing keeps showing up. That could be a good, like a positive, progressive thing forward, or it could be a negative, like detractor. Wow, we'd really need to be careful of that. We don't want that thing to happen, right? So either way, you are looking at an extremely more quantum approach to decision making instead of again, the analogy of an intersection where you're like, okay, I'm going to go left or right. I don't know where to do. I'm stuck. This changes your decision making processes exponentially. Like it will really, really speed you up. All right. And then lastly, number 5, pay attention to your team's reactions when you talk about these different outcomes, because their energy will often reveal insights that maybe you weren't aware of. This is where being a leader can really take you to the next level. When you're not just looking for direct feedback from what they say, but just watch their energy. When you start talking about these 4 radically different outcomes, what do you get back? Obviously, you're the visionary, typically speaking, if you're the one thinking through this type of stuff at this level. But what I want you to consider is, what don't I know, or what don't I see on the daily basis that maybe my frontline team does, or maybe my client services team does, or maybe the people in marketing, they know or experience something today that one of these radical different outcomes would either extremely benefit or potentially be a real problem in their world, right? So now what you're doing is you're bringing all these 4 radical different outcomes with the 3 to 4 different downstream effects. You're looking for commonalities, and then you're bringing these to your team, and then you're testing that against their experience. See what we're doing? We're like magnifying, then magnifying again, then magnifying again, then magnifying again, because now we're tapping these 4 radical different outcomes into their brains. And then you're kind of assessing, wow, look at all the different outcomes or different things that are coming out of it. So now you are not just looking at a decision from, should we go left or right? You are looking at it through so many different orders of consequences and variables that you will get downstream, number 1, faster, because you won't have to go turn around and go back the wrong, oh, that didn't work. Turn around, head back. We got to start over, right? You'll avoid a lot of that kind of trial and error process. But also you will be making decisions at the next order of clarity. Again, kind of going back to what I said at the original, at the beginning here, which is like, oh man, I look back now and if only I knew then what I know now. Well, what's the difference about that? The difference is that you've had 5 or 10 years of learning experience, trial, error, blood, sweat, and tears, and the whole thing, right? To then get you to the point that you could say that, oh man, if only I'd known that. Well, now you do. You have a process for being able to create that today. You don't have to wait 5 years or 10 years to look back and go, look at all these different considerations and look at all these different variables that I understand now. We can do that today simply by running it through this quantum decision-making process and then analyzing it against the other people that would be involved, using it in their brains, right? It's really, really powerful. Kind of revisit this one. I know we're kind of like tapping into something that you might not be that familiar with doing, but if it sounds complex, watch or listen back to this again, just even a couple times, and then just try it on something specific. Like pick, again, one big thing that you're trying to kind of mull on, or you're definitely at a decision point. Run it through this filter and watch what happens. I know you'll be glad you did. It will definitely be a game changer in how you do your decision making. All right. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you have anywhere to drop us a line, I'd love to know what you think about this, because it will definitely change your processes for making decisions. All right. We'll see you on another episode of the Wealthy Consultant Podcast. Take care, guys. See ya.